talk from here. Oh, up. Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started so we can be out by 8 p.m. I'm Assistant City Manager Lori Houston, and I oversee several departments within the city, and one of them happens to be the Office of Historic Preservation. And we've assigned the redevelopment and master plan effort for Brackenridge Park under historic preservation to make sure we protect one of our most treasured assets. And so Shannon Miller is here tonight. She's in the back. And we also have Homer Garcia, who we're coordinating with, and he is our Director of Parks, and he's also in the back. So for tonight, really what we're going to do is talk about our priorities for Brackenridge Park. Now, we have a lot of different plans going on in Brackenridge Park, starting with the Brackenridge Park Master Plan that was done by Parks and Recreation, the Cultural Landscape Plan that was done by the Brackenridge Park Conservancy. We have the Essay Tomorrow Visioning Session that covered downtown, also covered Midtown, which Brackenridge Park happens to be part of. So we have a lot of planning efforts, and they mention a lot of the same types of projects, but they really aren't coordinated. Some of them don't reference each other. Some of them are a little bit outdated. And so what we're doing with this effort is to really reconcile all of those planning efforts that have happened in the past 10 years, bring them together, identify the commonalities, identify where there might be some differences, and then identify all the projects each of those reconciliation plans mention. But it's really to make sure that we are all operating on the same page when we're talking about Brackenridge Park. City Council is the one that has funded the majority of these plans, and a lot of the projects that we are planning for Brackenridge Park, they have to be approved by City Council because of the funding. And it's really difficult to go to City Council and say, this is in line with the Brackenridge Park Master Plan done in 2017. This is in line with the 2020 Cultural Landscape Plan. We need to make sure we have a reconciled plan that everyone looks to be the roadmap for Brackenridge Park. So we have hired a team that's led by Ford, Powell, and Carson to help us reconcile these plans. And today we're going to talk about different priorities that happen within the park. And you'll hear more about that later on after my opening remarks. Another thing that we're going to be doing is looking at projects and project inventory. What are our project priorities? What do we need to get done? And we need some commonalities about that. So today we're coming to you all, we don't have preconceived projects in mind. This is about the projects we're moving forward, and we want to hear your feedback on those. There's been a lot of projects discussed in the past, but it's a new day. We have great leadership in the Conservancy. We have Shannon Miller, who once again I mentioned why we have this project under the leadership of Office of Historic Preservation, and that's because we want to preserve this historical asset. And we also have an advisory committee that several of the committee members are here today. Can I ask those committee members to stand up if you're on the advisory committee? So all these people in this room you might know. They're representatives of your neighborhood, of our community assets like the Whitty Museum. We have representatives from the Conservation Society, and we have representatives from the surrounding neighborhood associations, as well as other stakeholders that are within the park or users of the park. But they are helping us drive this effort, and tonight's exercise is to really give you an update on what we've been doing. As I mentioned, we'll break out into sessions, and we'll talk about those different priorities. But the takeaway tonight is we really want your input. We really want your feedback. This is not a done plan. This is the start of creating that plan. And at the end, we plan on having a reconciled master plan that we've all come together to develop. And then we will have a project list by priorities of what projects we want to use the TERS funding that we have that's being developed by the Midtown TERS to use for these projects. So as I mentioned, City Council, they really have the control over this project because one, the city owns the park, and two, we are funding these improvements. And so Luckily, Dr. Councilmember Sue Kaur, she is our District 1 representative, and she is a lover of this park, and she's a great advocate for parks and park space, and she is going to be leading us as we go towards to council for some of these approvals and briefings. And so with that, I'd like the councilwoman to step up with her beautiful dog, and I always get the name wrong, it's Hira.
All right, good evening. How is everyone doing? Well, there's such a good turnout. I love seeing so many people here for this community input process because it's so important. So I just wanted to get a little bit of an idea of everyone who's in the room. So I'm just gonna shout out our district, and if you'll just raise your hand so we can see kind of the representation, because I know this park is used by our entire city and not just one. And Council Member McCree-Rodriguez and I actually both split the park, and so would just love to see where everyone's from today. So if you're from District 1, could you raise your hand? Awesome, highly represented, love it. District 2, great. District 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, on 10. Awesome, thank you all so much. And then the next thing I want to do is, you guys are going to be spending the evening together coming up with ideas, and I always think it's great to know who you're sitting by, at least one different person that you haven't maybe talked to before. So if you would just take a second to look around, if you know everybody in your row, just say hi. But take 30 seconds just to say hi and maybe introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. All right, thank you all for that. That was awesome. I was thinking maybe everybody in the row had talked to each other, but I noticed that even a few of you all are new to each other, so that was great. So from my perspective, I don't know if I can still call myself the newly elected, but I think I'm going to use that my whole first term, so hopefully use that. But I'm really excited to be here with you all today. The Brackenridge Park is one of our most historic parks in the city, and also brings so many people together from all over the city. And it should be the folks that are using it on a day-to-day basis that drive the process forward, right? You all are going to come up with ideas and priorities for this process that's going to be far more stronger and more immense because you get to engage with it on a day-to-day basis. Maybe you live right by it. Maybe I have things that I love about the park. Kira and I, we play at the Brackenridge Golf Course and also love to play football around the baseball courts and probably mess up all the fields that the kids are using. But so all of us have a different perspective that we use and bring to the park. And that's why it's really important to be able to share these conversations, talk about what could this best be activated, because our public spaces are best used when we both hold a preservation and the history hand in hand with activation, right? If we're not bringing families out, if we're not bringing individuals and their people out to our spaces, we're not best utilizing them. So our goal, at least, is to see what would it take to best activate this park, and what are the ideas that you have that you can bring to the table, so that's what we can fund. Which is why it's so important that so many of you all are here. I can't reiterate how important this process that you all are partaking in is. We no preconceived notions. I know that's the worst part about community input. It's like, y'all are gonna call us here, take all this information, and then never come back and say, this is what we heard and this is what we're doing. And I promise that's the one thing that I will try my best to hold city and us as a council accountable, is that we tell you, this is what we heard, and then this is how we're gonna prioritize what we do with the park moving forward. So thank you so much to city staff. Thank you for the advisory committee for putting this together. We can't wait to participate and are looking forward to hearing all of the creative ideas. And as an arborist, I'm sure you'll come up with some great stuff too. Thanks, and it's nice to meet you all.
So we have new leadership with our District 1. I'm going to say you're new for at least 1 year. So you've got until May 2024. And then we have new leadership with the Brackenridge Park Conservancy. And Terry's been on for about about a year. Man, it seems so short. And so we have Terry Brechtel, who is serving as the interim CEO, Director of Brackenridge Park Conservancy, is really helping lead this effort along with our board. So I'm going to pass it over to Terry to talk about what we're doing tonight.
Thank you, Lori. Lori and I are co-chairing this effort. First of all, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. This is Brackenridge Park's 125th anniversary. And December 4th, 1899, 199 acres was dedicated by George Brackenridge, and thus we have Brackenridge Park. So a shout out to George Brackenridge. The Conservancy hopes and wants to celebrate him all year long. So check our website. We're going to have lots of programming so that we can enjoy the park and George Brackenridge's legacy. Also tonight, I want to take a few moments to talk a little bit about the role that the Conservancy's been playing. You know, this park has 12,000 years of history, right? And the landscape is so diverse. And so if you think about it, 12,000 years of history, that 125 years we're celebrating this year is just really just a very small part of the park. But I think it's important, even though that's a short history. Brackenridge Park is so much more than a municipal park. It's a very rich cultural landscape, and that's why the Brackenridge Park Conservancy commissioned a cultural landscape report. That's one of the 3 plans that we're going to be reconciling through this process, is that cultural landscape report. And so we're very happy to be a part of this, and we're happy to serve with this community, and I really look forward to this process. The last but not least is I appreciate the councilwoman asking the stakeholder and advisory committee members to stand up and be recognized, because without them, we could not be doing this process. And they really are leading the process from every inch in detail that you see today, from the breakout rooms. We've been meeting for the past 6 months, and they've been leading the effort. And I think it's really important because they're going to be the ones that you're going to be working with tonight, looking to you to give us feedback and input on this process. So with that, I want to introduce Jay Loudon. Jay is the project lead on this project, along with Allison Chambers with Ford, Powell, and Carson. And he's going to give you a quick overview of where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. So the consultant team, as Terry and others mentioned, is Ford, Powell, and Carson, with Workshop as well, and Talk Strategy is our public engagement consultant. So one bit of input that I heard on a different project that has really stuck with me, and it's especially relevant to this project, is someone basically said, hey, no one ever asked us what we really wanted. And there was a great deal of frustration with some of the basic assumptions of that particular project, which if they'd been asked, we would have known, but that wasn't known. So the point of what we're doing here is exactly to ask those foundational questions about what people care about most about the park, so that we can build from that point going forward. So this is, to a certain extent, a reset of where we are with the park and with projects. You're going to hear a fair bit of discussion about guiding principles tonight. So what are those? Kind of boiled down to its essence, it is the very core of what you think is important. You know, what facet of history, what tradition do you have in the park? What natural system, from the very specific to the very general, do you care very most about? What should be kept the way it is? What should be changed? So it's been mentioned, this work is led by an advisory committee. It's our job as a project team to help them work through some of the very complex issues and the difficulties of a very complicated process of working with the committee as stakeholders and then public engagement. So they've done a tremendous amount of work, and you see some of that in the back of the room here. You'll see some in the breakout rooms as well. But I want to reemphasize a point that was made several times already. These are all things that are put together to give you something to respond to. But understand that we do so with the explicit intention that you tell us where that is wrong, where it needs to be amplified, where there is a new principle that nobody has thought about yet, but you know it. We want that input. So this is, I think, particularly important to mention, given that the size of the group is a little bit larger than we were anticipating, which is fantastic. But also it means that the strategy of having people in breakout rooms and conversations facilitated by members of the project team, and we've got committee members and technical advisors as well here, that could be more challenging than we want it to be, but that is not the only way that we're getting your input either tonight or going forward. So we've got a camera set up in the back of the room where we hope if you would rather just kind of talk through an issue in front of a camera, that'd be great. We'd love to record your thoughts. We've got all sorts of opportunities, including the boards here. Feel free to write on those boards your thoughts. You can do so anonymously. You can leave your information if you'd like for us to know. But really, anything you'd like to do as far as letting us know what your thoughts are is critical. And we know that it can be a lot to walk into a room like this and talk about something that you think deserves a lot of thoughtful consideration just in front of a bunch of people. Maybe you want to take it home and think about it for a while and then give us your input. That's great. We've got a survey set up to capture that. There's some QR codes on cards that you'll see in the rooms, and we've also got paper copies of the survey here. So take that, take your time, think it through, and then let us know what you think. So one last note here. It's a kind of a particularity about what we're doing here. It's tricky. So the instinct is always in a planning project to talk about specific projects. They're easy to relate to. And a lot of you here probably have very specific projects in mind that you'd like to talk about, and that's okay. It's hard to break away from that, but what we really need to do so that we can apply principles generally to large sets of possible projects, even some that haven't been considered to this point, is we need to generalize those thoughts. So what I would encourage you to do, that project that you feel deeply about, something that you really want to see implemented, or something that you are violently against, think about what is the very core of that. What is the principle behind it? What's the thing that you care about? That's what we want to hear about, not the specifics of a project, but what is the principle at the heart of that? That's the particularly useful bit of input for this process. So I mentioned we've got representatives from the committee here, and we've got two representatives here who are going to talk a little bit about the guiding principles, the very draft, and not only open to, but we want your input on principles. So we've got Suzanne Scott, who's the state director of the Nature Conservancy, and Vince Michael, who's the executive director of the San Antonio Conservation Society, and they're going to talk us through that real quick.
Thank you, Jay. And I think we're going to get slides at some point of the guiding principles, which is, I think, important because these are slides. They're not pieces of stone. These are not set in stone. The committee has been meeting for about 6 months in an attempt to build a strategy to reconcile these various master plans. It's been a very complex undertaking, and we think it's the first of its kind in the city in many ways, because usually you start and you have a project and you react to it. Now it's really a matter of getting together these principles. And we felt our first action was we needed something, some sort of charter, some sort of constitution, if you will. And that's where the guiding principles came from, that we sort of reached through discussion. And I should say we also, and especially important because Suzanne's here, we have technical advisory experts in each area. So whether you're talking about hydrology, whether you're talking about wildlife, whether you're talking about recreation, whether you're talking about the zoo, things like that, we have experts in each of those areas. So the principles are meant to be the foundation of which we judge projects. We want to agree on these principles so that we can use them later to sort of look at projects and see how they fit into the guiding principles. And they're meant to be applicable to any project, either now or in the future. So that's the goal, and that's why they're not set in stone. We're looking for your input. I'll let Suzanne say a couple more words.
Thank you, Vince. It's so great to see everybody here tonight, and we know we're going to get some really great feedback from y'all tonight. These guiding principles are, again, as he said, they are draft tonight. We want you to feel as though you're a co-creator along with us and along with the committee. They've spent a lot of time with this, but sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and it's good to have people looking at this from a broader perspective. So that's what we're really trying to have all of you think with us tonight about. So these guiding principles that we're going to go through tonight, and then when you get into the rooms, we really want you to provide that feedback specifically. There's also going to be additional criteria that you will be looking at as well, not only the guiding principles, but also the criteria. And right now we're going to go through sort of two groups of guiding principles. First, sort of looking at those that respect the people, the users, and nature. And then Vince will go through those guiding principles that look at the respect for history and culture. So let's first look at those guiding principles that look at people, the users, and nature. So the committee has said they believe projects should promote inclusivity and should not privilege users based on class, race, cultural tradition, age, income, physical ability, and other factors. In other words, make this a park for everybody. Projects should promote free use of the park and, where possible, should open access to areas of the park which are currently restricted. So let's make as much of this park open and free for users to enjoy. And then, of course, this project is very connected to nature. The river runs right through it. So projects should incorporate components which enhance natural habitat, but also should mesh nature and recreation to further people's connections to nature. So how can people and nature thrive together in this park? And as you know, there's a lot of investment that the River Authority and the city and the county are looking at making into this river. So again, there'll be projects that we are looking at through this lens, and any feedback we get from y'all.
Thank you, Suzanne. The next principles deal with history and culture, and that's, of course, something that's special to the Conservation Society. The first is projects should honor and interpret cultural history, including traditions of use, both modern and historic. So you're all familiar with things like the Easter celebrations, the variety of other uses that have happened over time, and those are important cultural traditions. Secondly, where existing physical history can be preserved, it should be. Where that is not possible or nothing remains to be preserved, interpretation through a variety of means should be incorporated. So we've learned much in recent years. Lewis Fisher's wonderful book about the history of Brackenridge Park. Terry mentioned it goes back 12,000 years. There's not a lot you see today from 12,000 years ago. So this is sort of a guiding principle for looking at saving important structures like the pump house, for example, and also interpreting important things that can't be seen. Next, projects should take the entire history and prehistory of the area that is now Brackenridge Park into consideration, including prehistoric use, Spanish colonial development, the land uses precedents to establishment of the park, and the history of the park itself. Further, projects should contribute to the public's understanding of that full history and should not exclude periods of interpretation. So much as our first principle was about making it for everyone, we want the history and culture to be all histories and culture that have touched upon the park. And then the final guiding principle, I think we're going to have in a next slide, is respect for compromise. If a project has internal conflict between principles but is still deemed worthy of implementation by the evaluation process, divergent principles should be respected through a balanced approach. No principle may be ignored. When you're dealing with a place where people are doing things and there's also nature and wildlife, there will always be conflicts at some point. So respect for compromise is one of our guiding principles.
So I hope that y'all have the opportunity to really think about these principles, and as you go into the breakout rooms, we're really going to want your feedback on these principles. Do we have it right? Does the committee have it right? Are we missing something? Is there something that we need to put on these principles that maybe we just haven't thought of yet? So I'm going to turn it over for some more information about the logistics for tonight.
Thanks y'all so much. All right, I've got the logistics. So at this time, we're going to invite you to make your way out of the doors behind you. over this way to one of the 4 breakout rooms. So when you signed in, you got a number. That is the number that you are going to head into the room. Now, some folks may have come in and not gotten a number. We can help you with that. But the goal here is just to find an open seat. So if you would kind of go to your number, go to your room, and you will have the opportunity to hear from every subcommittee. They are going to do the rotation. Our community who's here with us today can stay in that room. So we also have to just reiterate, as Jay mentioned, audio and video recording in the back of the room with Chris. So feel free if you want to pop out of your breakout session or if you want to head over there before you head into your session, feel free. That information will be shared with the meeting organizers. And then again, our subcommittees will rotate about every 20 minutes. So you'll be able to hear from everyone, engage with all the subcommittees and their various areas of focus. We also have note takers in each room. So you'll see those notes being taken in real time. Discussions in the breakout rooms will begin in about 5 minutes after we all head that way. Restrooms and water fountains are right outside these doors as well. So thank you again for the time tonight. And please head on out that way and make your way to your breakout room. Thanks, everyone.